The screams tore through the fifth floor of Mercy Heights Medical Center, like nothing the staff had ever heard before. If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will leave you absolutely speechless. 11 doctors, the best money could buy, stood frozen in the luxury maternity suite, while Vanessa Whitmore's body convulsed on the delivery table. Her husband, billionaire real estate mogul Devin Whitmore, pressed his back against the wall, his $2,000 suit drenched in sweat, his hands shaking as he watched his wife's life slip away with every passing second. The lead obstetrician, Dr. Patricia Reynolds, had delivered over 3,000 babies in her 30-year career. But right now her hands trembled over the monitor, showing the baby's heart rate dropping dangerously low. The room smelled of fear and antiseptic, and the silence between Vanessa's screams was worse than the screams themselves, because in those moments, everyone could hear the truth nobody wanted to say out loud. Blood soaked through the surgical sheets, more blood than anyone expected, and Dr. Reynolds exchanged a look with her surgical team that made Devin's stomach drop. The baby was stuck. The umbilical cord was wrapped around the baby's neck. Vanessa's blood pressure was crashing. And despite 11 of the country's most expensive doctors crowding that room, despite machines that cost more than most people's houses, despite everything modern medicine had to offer, nobody knew what to do next. Devin had paid $2 million to have his child delivered in this private wing, had flown in specialists from Johns Hopkins and Mayo Clinic, had spared no expense to ensure his wife and baby would have the best care money could buy. But money meant nothing now. His wife was dying. His child was dying. And all his billions couldn't change the fact that he was completely, utterly powerless. Outside the window, 5 stories below, Keisha Thompson knelt in the hospital garden, her dirt-stained gloves pulling weeds from around the rose bushes that lined the maternity wing. She was 42 years old, bone-thin from skipping meals to send money to her elderly mother in Alabama, and her hospital maintenance uniform had seen better days. The June heat pressed down on Atlanta like a wet blanket, but Keisha didn't mind because being outside in the dirt, working with growing things, was the only place she felt like herself anymore. She'd been working at Mercy Heights for 6 years, invisible to the doctors and nurses who rushed past her every day. Just another black woman, in a blue uniform pushing a cart of gardening tools. But what nobody at that hospital knew, what nobody had ever bothered to ask, was that Keisha came from a lineage of midwives that stretched back 7 generations. Her great-great-great-grandmother had been a slave on a Mississippi plantation, catching babies in the dead of night when white doctors wouldn't come. Her grandmother had delivered over 2,000 babies in rural Alabama without losing a single mother or child. Her own mother had been a legendary midwife until arthritis twisted her hands into useless claws. Keisha had been trained from the age of 7, had caught her first baby at 14, had knowledge passed down through generations that no medical school could teach. But that was a lifetime ago, back before her husband Jerome got locked up for a crime he didn't commit, back before she had to take whatever job she could find to survive, back before the world decided that her hands were only good for pulling weeds. She heard the screams through the open window, and her hands froze on the rose bush. That sound, that particular pitch and rhythm, it was a sound Keisha knew in her bones. A woman in the final stages of labor, a baby in distress, complications that were spiraling out of control. She stood up slowly, her knees creaking, and tilted her head toward the 5th floor. The screaming continued, desperate and raw. And then she heard something that made her blood run cold. A man's voice, Devin's voice, shouting through his tears. Do something. Somebody do something. I don't care what it costs. Save my wife. Save my baby, please. And then Dr. Reynolds' voice, shaking with defeat. Mr. Whitmore, we've tried everything. The baby won't come. Your wife is hemorrhaging. We need to prepare for the possibility that we might lose them both. Keisha's heart hammered in her chest. She looked down at her dirty gloves, at the cheap uniform that marked her as someone who didn't matter, at the garden shears in her hand. She thought about her grandmother's voice, firm and steady. Baby girl, when you hear that call, you answer it. Don't matter if they want you there or not. Don't matter if they believe in what you can do. A life is a life, and if God put you in position to save it, you save it. Keisha had sworn she'd never catch another baby, not after losing Jerome, not after the world had beaten her down. So far she could barely remember who she used to be. But that scream came again, desperate and fading, and Keisha dropped her garden shears. She pulled off her gloves and walked toward the hospital entrance, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The security guard at the staff entrance, Big Ray, looked up from his phone as she approached. "Keisha, you look like you've seen a ghost. You all right?" She shook her head. "I need to get to the 5th floor. The maternity suite. There's a woman dying up there." Big Ray frowned. "That's the private wing. You know we can't just walk up there. Those folks paid serious money for privacy." But Keisha was already moving past him, her feet carrying her toward the elevator like they had a mind of their own. "Ray, I'm telling you, if I don't get up there right now, that woman and her baby are both going to die. I can hear it. I know it. Please." Something in her voice, some ancient authority that came from 7 generations of women who had stared death down and won, made Big Ray step aside. He hit the elevator button for her, his face troubled. "You're going to get us both fired, Keisha." She stepped into the elevator, her hand steady now, her mind clear. "Then I guess we both getting fired today." The elevator doors opened on the 5th floor, and chaos erupted. Nurses ran past her, their faces pale. Doctors shouted orders. Medical equipment beeped urgent warnings. And through it all, Vanessa's screams had turned into something worse, a weak, gasping sound that meant she was running out of strength to fight. Keisha walked down that hallway like she owned it, like she wasn't just a poor gardener in a dirty uniform, like she was exactly what she was born to be. She reached the door to the luxury suite just as Dr. Reynolds stepped out, her surgical mask pulled down, tears streaming down her face. The doctor looked at Keisha with empty eyes. "We lost a heartbeat. The baby's gone. And if we don't get Mrs. Whitmore into emergency surgery in the next 60 seconds, we're going to lose her too." Keisha stepped forward, her voice calm and clear. "Let me in that room. I can save them both." Dr. Reynolds blinked, like she was seeing Keisha for the first time. "Who the hell are you?" And Keisha smiled, a sad, knowing smile that carried the weight of 7 generations. "I'm the answer to that man's prayer. Now step aside before it's too late. What happened when Keisha walked into that room will shock you to your core. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because next chapter is coming, and you will not believe what this poor gardener did that 11 doctors couldn't do. Drop a comment right now telling me if you think the doctors will let her try to save that baby. This story is just getting started." Dr. Reynolds laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the hallway, and for a moment Keisha saw every ounce of exhaustion and defeat in the woman's eyes. "Security! We need security up here now." The doctor's voice cracked as she pointed at Keisha like she was something dangerous, something that needed to be removed immediately. 2 security guards came running, but before they could reach her, Devin Whitmore stumbled out of the delivery room, his face streaked with tears, his expensive suit jacket discarded somewhere inside. He looked at Keisha standing there in her gardening uniform, dirt still under her fingernails, and something passed between them. Some desperate recognition that this moment was bigger than protocol or common sense. "Wait," Devin said, his voice hoarse from screaming. "Just wait a goddamn minute." He turned to Dr. Reynolds, his hands shaking. "You just told me my baby is dead. You just told me my wife has 60 seconds left to live. So unless you've got some miracle hidden in your pocket, I want to hear what this woman has to say." Dr. Reynolds' face went red with anger and professional humiliation. "Mr. Whitmore, this is insane. This woman is a gardener. She has no medical training, no credentials, no business being anywhere near your wife. If you let her in that room and something goes wrong, the liability alone will destroy this hospital." But Devin wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at Keisha with the wild hope of a drowning man spotting a life raft. "Can you really save them? Can you save my wife and my baby?" Keisha met his eyes and nodded once, firm and certain. Yes, but you have to trust me, and you have to tell these people to get out of my way. Right now. Inside the delivery room, Vanessa Whitmore lay pale and barely conscious on the blood-soaked table, her chest rising and falling in shallow gasps that were getting further and further apart. The remaining doctors and nurses stood frozen, their faces masked with professional horror, because they all knew they were watching a woman die, and there was nothing left in their training to stop it. Keisha walked past them all without a word, her eyes scanning Vanessa's body with the practiced assessment of someone who had seen this exact situation 100 times before. She moved to the side of the bed and placed her hands gently on Vanessa's swollen belly, feeling for the baby's position, and what she felt made her close her eyes and whisper a prayer her grandmother had taught her. The baby was breech and twisted, the umbilical cord wrapped twice around a tiny neck, positioned in a way that made vaginal delivery impossible according to every textbook these doctors had ever read. But Keisha's hands knew something those textbooks didn't. She knew that sometimes, with the right pressure in the right places, with hands that understood the ancient rhythm of birth, a baby could be turned even this late, even when everyone else had given up hope. I need everyone out, Keisha said quietly, not looking up from Vanessa's belly. Everyone except him. She nodded toward Devin. Dr. Reynolds exploded. Absolutely not. I will not stand here and watch you kill this woman. Security. Remove her immediately. But Devin stepped between the doctor and Keisha, his face set with the same ruthless determination that had built his billion-dollar empire. Everyone out. Now. That's not a request. The doctors filed out one by one, some shaking their heads in disgust, others looking relieved that they wouldn't have to witness what they assumed would be a tragic disaster. Dr. Reynolds was the last to leave, and she stopped at the door to deliver one final warning. Mr. Whitmore, when this goes wrong, it will go wrong. You'll have to live with the fact that you let your wife and child die because you trusted a gardener over trained medical professionals. I hope you can sleep at night with that knowledge. She slammed the door behind her, leaving just Keisha, Devin, and the dying woman on the table. Keisha looked at Devin, and her voice was gentle but firm. Your wife is going to scream. She's going to scream louder than she's screamed all day. And you're going to want to stop me, but you can't. You have to hold her hand, and you have to trust that I know what I'm doing. Can you do that? Devin nodded, his face white as paper, and moved to take Vanessa's hand. Keisha closed her eyes and let her hands move the way her grandmother's hands had moved, the way her great-grandmother's hands had moved, following knowledge that lived in her bones and blood. She found a spot on Vanessa's belly just below the rib cage and began to press with a slow, steady pressure that was nothing like the urgent, panicked movements of the doctors. She whispered words in a language Devin didn't understand. Old words passed down through generations, and under her hand she felt something shift. The baby moved. Just a fraction of an inch, but it moved. Vanessa's eyes flew open and she screamed, a sound so raw and primal that Devin nearly let go of her hand. But Keisha's voice cut through the scream like a knife. Hold her. Don't let go. Keisha's hands moved in small circles now, guiding, coaxing, working with the baby's body instead of against it. Sweat poured down her face and her arms trembled with effort. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She felt the baby turn again, felt the umbilical cord loosen just slightly, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had maybe 2 minutes before Vanessa's body gave out completely. Push, Keisha commanded, her voice carrying the authority of 7 generations of women who had commanded laboring mothers through the valley of death. Push now, Vanessa. Your baby is ready. Your baby wants to live. Push. And Vanessa, barely conscious, somehow found strength she didn't know she had. She pushed with everything left in her failing body, and Keisha's hands guided the baby down, turned at the exact right angle, unwound the cord with movements so precise and practiced they looked like magic. The baby's head crowned. The shoulders followed. And then, in a rush of blood and fluid that would have made those 11 doctors faint if they'd been in the room to see it, the baby slid into Keisha's waiting hands. A boy. tiny and blue and perfectly still. Devon's heart stopped. The baby wasn't crying. The baby wasn't moving. The baby was dead, just like Dr. Reynolds had said, and he let this crazy woman kill his wife trying to prove something that couldn't be proven. But Keisha wasn't panicking. She cleared the baby's airways with her fingers, then flipped him over and rubbed his back in firm, rhythmic strokes, her mouth moving in silent prayer. Nothing happened. 5 seconds passed. 10 seconds. Devon started to sob, great heaving sobs that shook his whole body. And then Keisha did something the doctors would later say was medically impossible. She placed her mouth over the baby's tiny nose and mouth and breathed. One gentle breath, and then another, and then a third. On the third breath, the baby's chest expanded. On the fourth breath, his skin turned from blue to pink. And on the fifth breath, he opened his mouth and let out a cry so loud and strong and full of life that it could be heard all the way down the hallway, where 11 doctors stood in stunned silence. Keisha wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and placed him on Vanessa's chest, her own eyes streaming with tears. "Your son," she whispered. "He's perfect." And then, before Devon could say thank you, before he could ask her name or offer her money or do anything at all, Keisha's knees buckled and she collapsed on the floor, completely unconscious. The baby was alive. The mother was alive. But what just happened to the woman who saved them both? Hit that like button right now and make sure you're subscribed, because next chapter reveals secrets about Keisha's past that will blow your mind. Comment below if you think Devon will reward her or if those doctors will destroy her for what she just did. This story is about to get even more intense. Before you find out what happens next, smash that subscribe button, because this story is about to take a turn that will leave you absolutely shook. Keisha woke up in a hospital bed 3 hours later, her head pounding and her body aching like she'd been hit by a truck. The room was small and plain, nothing like the luxury suite where she delivered Devon's baby, and for a moment she thought maybe it had all been a dream. But then the door burst open, and Dr. Reynolds walked in, followed by 2 men in expensive suits who Keisha immediately recognized as lawyers, and she knew with sinking certainty that her nightmare was just beginning. "Ms. Thompson," Dr. Reynolds said, her voice cold and clinical, "these gentlemen are from the hospital's legal department. You are being terminated effective immediately for unauthorized medical intervention, violation of hospital protocol, and criminal trespassing in a restricted area. Security will escort you from the premises as soon as you're cleared to walk." One of the lawyers stepped forward, his face expressionless. "Additionally, Ms. Thompson, we're pursuing criminal charges for practicing medicine without a license. That's a felony in the state of Georgia. You're looking at up to 5 years in prison and a $50,000 fine. You have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Keisha sat up slowly, her hands shaking, and the reality of what she'd done crashed over her like a wave. She'd saved a life. She'd saved 2 lives. And now they were going to send her to prison for it. She thought about her mother in Alabama, already struggling to pay for her medication, on a fixed income. She thought about her husband Jerome, still locked up in a Georgia prison for the next 8 years. And she realized that in trying to do the right thing, she might have destroyed what little was left of her life. But before Dr. Reynolds could say another word, the door opened again, and Devon Whitmore walked in, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. He was still wearing the same blood-stained pants from the delivery, but he'd changed into a fresh shirt, and his eyes were red from crying but absolutely focused. "Get out," he said quietly to the lawyers and Dr. Reynolds. "All of you. Now." Dr. Reynolds drew herself up to her full height. "Mr. Whitmore, I understand you're emotional right now, but this woman broke multiple laws. She could have killed your wife and child. The hospital has a responsibility to—" Devon's voice cut through hers like a blade. "My wife is alive. My son is alive. And according to every single one of those 11 doctors who are now sitting in the conference room trying to figure out how to explain why they couldn't do what a gardener did, both of them should be dead. So I'll ask you one more time, very politely. Get the hell out of this room before I have my lawyers bury this hospital so deep in lawsuits that you'll be selling bedpans on eBay to pay your rent." The lawyers exchanged glances and quietly left. Dr. Reynolds stayed for a moment longer, her face twisted with anger and humiliation. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Whitmore. This woman is not what she seems." Devin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Neither am I, Doctor. Neither am I." When they were alone, Devin pulled up a chair and sat down heavily, and Keisha could see the exhaustion in every line of his face. Devin looked at Keisha for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I don't know who you are. I don't know where you came from or how you knew what to do when all those expensive doctors gave up. But you saved my family. You saved everything that matters to me in this world. So I'm going to ask you once, and I need you to tell me the truth. Who are you, Keisha Thompson?" And something in his voice, some genuine respect and curiosity, broke down the walls Keisha had built around her heart for the past 6 years. She told him everything. She told him about growing up in rural Alabama, the 7th generation in a line of midwives that stretched back to slavery. She told him about learning the ancient ways from her grandmother, about catching her first baby at 14 years old, about the knowledge that lived in her hands that no medical school could teach. She told him about meeting Jerome when she was 19, about how they'd built a small midwifery practice together in Montgomery, about the 200 babies she delivered before everything fell apart. And then she told him the part that still made her voice shake with rage and grief. She told him about the night Jerome was arrested for armed robbery, a crime he didn't commit, a crime that happened while he was home with her. She told him about the public defender who barely looked at his case, about the all-white jury that deliberated for less than an hour, about the judge who sentenced her husband to 10 years in prison without blinking. She told him about losing their house, their practice, their entire life, about how she'd moved to Atlanta desperate for any work she could find, about taking a gardening job at Mercy Heights because it was the only place that would hire her. When Keisha finished talking, tears were streaming down her face, and Devin sat in silence for a long time, his hands clasped together, his jaw tight. Finally he spoke, and his voice was quiet but firm. "How much money do you need to get your husband the best lawyer in Georgia? How much to appeal his case and get him out of prison?" Keisha's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Mr. Whitmore, I didn't tell you all that to ask for money. I just wanted you to understand." Devin held up his hand. "I know you didn't ask. I'm offering. You saved my son's life. Keisha, you saved my wife's life. I owe you a debt I can never fully repay, but I can start by fixing this injustice. So tell me, how much?" Keisha's mind raced. She looked into appeals before, had consulted with lawyers who all said the same thing. Without new evidence or a high-powered attorney willing to dig deep, Jerome's case was hopeless. The kind of lawyer who could actually win an appeal would cost at least $200,000, money she'd never see in 10 lifetimes of pulling weeds. $200,000, she whispered. Maybe more, and that's just for the lawyer. That doesn't guarantee anything. Devin pulled out his phone and made a call. "James, it's Devin. I need you to wire $300,000 to..." He looked at Keisha expectantly. She gave him her bank account information in a daze, barely able to believe what was happening. "Done. It'll be in your account within the hour." And Keisha, that's just the beginning. Devin stood up and paced a small room, and Keisha could see his business mind working, calculating, planning. "Here's what's going to happen. First, I'm going to make sure those criminal charges disappear. I donate $10 million a year to this hospital, and they'll do what I tell them to do. Second, I'm going to hire you, not as a gardener, as a private consultant for my wife and son. Salary of $200,000 a year, full benefits, housing provided. You'll live in the guest house on our estate, and you'll be available whenever Vanessa or the baby needs you. Third, I'm going to fund whatever you need to get proper licensing and credentials, if that's what you want. Or if you just want to practice the old ways like your grandmother did, then that's what you'll do. I don't care about their rules anymore. Their rules almost killed my family. Keisha couldn't speak. She could barely breathe. This man, this billionaire who lived in a world so far removed from hers that they might as well be on different planets, was offering her a lifeline she'd never dreamed possible. But a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. Things this good didn't happen to people like her. There had to be a catch. There had to be something he wasn't telling her. Why? She asked finally. Why would you do all this for me? You don't even know me. Devin's face softened, and he looked toward the door, toward the luxury suite where his wife and newborn son were sleeping peacefully. Because you gave me everything, Keisha. Everything. And because I have a feeling that you and I are going to change a lot more than just one life before this is all over. Devin just offered Keisha a new life. But is it too good to be true? Make sure you're subscribed because next chapter is where everything changes and you'll discover the real reason Devin wants Keisha close. Drop a comment telling me if you trust Devin or if you think he's hiding something. Hit that notification bell because you do not want to miss what happens next. 3 weeks later, Keisha stood in the guest house on the Whitmore estate in Buckhead, the wealthiest neighborhood in Atlanta, and still couldn't believe this was her life now. The guest house was bigger than any place she'd ever lived, with marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over manicured gardens that made the hospital grounds look like a vacant lot. Her bank account had $300,000 in it, and she'd already hired the best criminal defense attorney in Georgia, a shark named Patricia Williams who'd looked at Jerome's case for exactly 45 minutes before declaring it was the most obvious wrongful conviction she'd seen in 20 years. Everything should have felt perfect. Everything should have felt like a miracle. But Keisha couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that Devin's generosity came with strings she couldn't see yet. She'd been living on the estate for 2 weeks, visiting Vanessa and baby Isaiah every day, teaching Vanessa the old ways of caring for a newborn that her grandmother had taught her. Vanessa was kind and grateful, always thanking Keisha with genuine warmth. But there was something in the way Devin watched Keisha when he thought she wasn't looking, something calculating and intense that made her skin prickle with unease. And then one night, everything became clear. Devin knocked on her door at 10 p.m., his face serious, and asked if they could talk. Keisha let him in, her heart pounding, and listened as the billionaire finally told her the truth about why he'd really brought her into his home. Devin sat down on her couch and ran his hands through his hair, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. Keisha, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you react. Can you do that? She nodded slowly, her hands clenched in her lap. Devin took a deep breath. When you saved Isaiah's life, when you did what 11 doctors couldn't do, something became very clear to me. The medical establishment is broken. It's expensive, it's cold, it's built on protocols and liability instead of actual care. And I started thinking about all the women like Vanessa, women with money and resources, who almost died because their doctors were too afraid to think outside the box. But more than that, I started thinking about all the women without money, all the black women in the city who are dying in childbirth at rates 3 times higher than white women, who don't get to have 11 specialists trying to save them, who are ignored and dismissed and left to die because nobody values their lives enough to fight for them. Keisha felt her breath catch because she knew exactly what he was talking about. She'd seen it herself back in Montgomery, had watched black mothers hemorrhage to death in understaffed hospitals, while white mothers down the hall got the best care money could buy. Devin leaned forward, his eyes bright with passion. I want to build something, Keisha. I want to build a birthing center right here in Atlanta, in the heart of the community that needs it most. A place where women like you, with your knowledge and your gifts, can practice the old ways alongside modern medicine. A place where black mothers can give birth with dignity and safety and actual care. And I want you to run it. Keisha stared at him, her mind racing, trying to process what he was saying. Devin, I'm not a doctor. I don't have credentials or licenses or any of the things I'd need to run a medical facility. They'd shut us down before we even opened the doors. Devin smiled. And there was something fierce in that smile, something that reminded Keisha why this man had built an empire from nothing. Let them try. I have lawyers who will bury anyone who tries to interfere. And as for credentials, I've already spoken to the Georgia Board of Medicine. I've made it very clear that I'm prepared to fund a pilot program that studies the effectiveness of traditional midwifery practices in reducing maternal mortality rates. They're very interested in my proposal, especially when I mention the $20 million grant I'm prepared to give to support it. Money talks, Keisha, and I have enough money to make them listen. Keisha stood up and walked the window, her thoughts spinning. This was everything she'd ever dreamed of, a chance to use her gift to save lives, to honor her grandmother's legacy, to make a real difference in her community. But there was still that nagging voice in her head, warning her that Devin Whitmore didn't do anything without a reason, that men like him always had an agenda. Why? She asked without turning around. Why would you spend millions of dollars on this? What do you really get out of it? The silence stretched so long that Keisha finally turned to look at him, and what she saw in his face made her stomach drop. Guilt. Deep, devastating guilt that had nothing to do with gratitude or generosity. Devin's voice was quiet when he finally spoke, and Keisha had to strain to hear him. 6 years ago, my sister Jasmine died in childbirth. She was 28 years old, healthy, no complications during her pregnancy. She went to Grady Memorial Hospital because she didn't have insurance, because I was too busy building my business to pay attention to the fact that my own sister was struggling. The doctors ignored her when she said something was wrong. They told her she was overreacting, that black women always exaggerated their pain. They left her in a room for 6 hours while she hemorrhaged internally. By the time they figured out something was actually wrong, it was too late. She died, and her baby died with her, and I wasn't even there because I was closing a real estate deal in Miami that I thought was more important than visiting my pregnant sister. Tears streamed down Devin's face, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. I didn't save Vanessa's life when I brought you into that delivery room, Keisha. You did. But I can save other women's lives by building this center, by making sure that what happened to Jasmine never happens to anyone else's sister or wife or daughter. That's what I get out of it. A chance to do something that actually matters instead of just making more money I don't need. A chance to maybe, possibly, forgive myself for letting my sister die alone and afraid in a hospital that didn't give a damn about her because she was black and poor. Keisha felt her own tears start to fall because she understood his pain in a way that few people could. She understood what it meant to lose someone you loved to a system that didn't value black lives, to carry guilt that ate at you every single day. But understanding his pain didn't mean she was ready to trust him completely. And Keisha had learned the hard way that good intentions didn't always lead to good outcomes. I need time to think about this, she said carefully. This is a huge decision, Devin. If I do this, I'm putting my name and my reputation on something that could fail. I'm putting myself out there for the whole world to see and judge. And if it goes wrong, I'm the one who'll pay the price, not you. Your money will protect you. My black face will be on every news station as a fraud who killed someone trying to play doctor. So forgive me if I need more than one emotional conversation to decide if I'm willing to risk everything. Devin nodded and stood up, wiping his eyes. You're right. Take all the time you need. But, Keisha, I want you to know something. I'm not asking you to do this alone. I'm asking you to do this with me. Every risk you take, I take too. Every fight you fight, I fight beside you. And if this whole thing crashes and burns, we go down together. That's my promise to you. He walked to the door, then paused and turned back. Oh, and one more thing. Your lawyer called me today. She found new evidence in Jerome's case. Security camera footage from a gas station 2 miles from the robbery that shows him buying milk at the exact time the crime was happening. The DA's office is reviewing it now. She thinks Jerome could be home in 3 months. And with that, Devin walked out, leaving Keisha standing in her luxury guest house, her heart pounding, her mind reeling, wondering if she'd just been given the opportunity of a lifetime or she was walking straight into a trap she couldn't see yet. Jerome might be coming home. The birthing center might actually happen. But is Devin telling Keisha everything? Or is there another betrayal waiting in the shadows? Smash that subscribe button right now, because next chapter is going to reveal secrets that will change everything you thought you knew about this story. Comment below if you think Keisha should trust Devin or run while she still can. This is about to get intense. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now, because what happens in this chapter will leave you absolutely speechless. 2 months later, Keisha sat in the courtroom and watched her husband walk out of prison a free man, and the moment Jerome wrapped his arms around her for the first time in 6 years, she broke down completely. He'd lost weight, his hair had gone gray at the temples, and there were new lines around his eyes that spoke of hard years and broken dreams. But he was alive and he was free, and he was hers again. Patricia Williams had done the impossible, had gotten Jerome's conviction overturned in record time, and the DA's office had issued a formal apology that meant absolutely nothing compared to the 6 years they'd stolen from him. Devin had come to courthouse too, standing quietly in the back with Vanessa and baby Isaiah. And when Jerome asked who the white couple was, Keisha had to explain everything that had happened since that day in the hospital. Jerome listened to the whole story with an expression she couldn't read, and when she finished, he just nodded slowly and said, "So we owe this man everything." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact that sat heavy between them. That night, in the guest house that was nicer than anywhere they'd ever lived together, Jerome and Keisha lay in bed and tried to figure out what their life looked like now. The birthing center was set to open in 3 months. Devin had purchased a building in the West End, had hired architects and contractors, had pushed through permits and inspections with the kind of speed that only money could buy. And he'd made good on his promise to fight beside Keisha, had appeared on local news defending traditional midwifery practices, had used his platform and his privilege to amplify voices that were usually ignored. But Jerome wasn't comfortable with any of it. And as he held Keisha in the darkness, he finally told her what had been bothering him since the moment he'd met Devin Whitmore. "Baby, I spent 6 years in prison learning how to read people, learning how to spot the ones who smile in your face while plotting behind your back. And I'm telling you right now, something about this man doesn't sit right with me. Nobody gives away millions of dollars out of pure guilt. Nobody puts this much effort into helping strangers unless they're getting something out of it." Keisha pulled away slightly, defensive. He lost his sister, Jerome. He's trying to make amends for not being there when she needed him. Why is it so hard to believe that maybe, just maybe, he actually cares about doing something good? Jerome sat up and turned on the lamp, and in the harsh light Keisha could see the prison had hardened him in ways she hadn't noticed before, had made him suspicious and careful in ways that broke her heart. Because men like Devin Whitmore don't become billionaires by caring Keisha. They become billionaires by using people. And right now he's using you. Maybe he has good intentions. Maybe this birthing center will save lives. But I guarantee you there's another angle here, something we're not seeing. And when it comes out, we're going to be the ones who pay the price, not him. They argue for an hour, their voices rising and falling. 6 years of separation creating cracks in their foundation that neither of them knew how to fix. Finally, exhausted, they fell into an uneasy silence. But Jerome's words had planted seeds of doubt that Keisha couldn't ignore, and she lay awake long after he fell asleep, wondering if she'd been so desperate for a miracle that she'd walked into a nightmare instead. The next morning, Keisha decided to do something she should have done months ago. She went to Devin's office in his main house, knocked on the door, and when he invited her in, she sat down across from his massive desk and looked him dead in the eyes. "I need to know everything, Devin. Every single thing you're not telling me about this birthing center. Every angle, every benefit you're getting, every reason you're really doing this. Because my husband thinks you're using me, and I need to know if he's right." Devin didn't look surprised or offended. He just leaned back in his chair and studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Your husband is smart. He's right to be suspicious. Yes, there are benefits to me beyond easing my guilt. The birthing center is going to be a nonprofit, which means significant tax write-offs for me. It's also going to generate positive press for my company, which is good for business. I'm planning to document the whole process, to create a model that can be replicated in other cities, and yes, that will make me look like a hero and probably open doors for me politically down the road. I haven't hidden any of this, Keisha. I've just been focused on the work and assumed you understood that people can have multiple motivations for doing the right thing. Keisha felt anger rising in her chest. So this whole time, while I thought you were some kind of saint trying to honor your sister's memory, you were actually building your political career on the backs of black women suffering? You were using their pain to make yourself look good. Devin's face hardened. No, I'm using my resources and my privilege to actually solve a problem that's been killing black women for generations while nobody with power gave a damn. Can I benefit from doing good and still be doing good? Or does my whiteness and my money automatically make everything I do suspect? The question hung in the air between them, sharp and complicated, and Keisha realized they were touching something deeper than just this one project, something about race and power and who gets to be the hero in whose story. You want the truth? Devin continued, his voice tight. The truth is that I can't win here. If I do nothing, I'm just another rich white man ignoring the problems in black communities. If I try to help, I'm either a white savior using black pain for my own gain, or I'm not doing enough, or I'm doing it the wrong way. I can't change the fact that I have money and power and privilege, but I can use those things to amplify voices like yours, to create opportunities that wouldn't exist otherwise, to save lives that the system would let die. And yes, I'll benefit from it. But those mothers and babies will benefit more. So you tell me, Keisha, should I have left you in that garden pulling weeds? Should I have let Jerome rot in prison for another 4 years? Should I cancel the birthing center and just keep my money and my privilege to myself so nobody can accuse me of having impure motives? Keisha stood up, her hands shaking, because she didn't have an answer that felt right. Everything he said was true. Everything Jerome said was true. And somehow both things existed at the same time, creating a mess so complicated she couldn't untangle it. I need time, she said quietly. I need to think about all of this without you in my face defending yourself. I need to figure out if I can live with the complexity of what this is. She walked to the door, then turned back. And Devin, thank you for getting my husband out of prison. Whatever else happens, I'll never forget that you gave him back to me. She spent the next 2 weeks talking to everyone she could find who might have insight into what she should do. She talked to her mother in Alabama, who said simply, "Baby, if this man is giving you a chance to save black mothers' lives, you take it and you don't look back. Let him benefit. Let him become president if he wants. As long as our babies stop dying, I don't care who gets the credit." She talked to Patricia Williams, who said, "Keisha, in my 20 years as a lawyer, I've learned that purity is a luxury poor people can't afford. Use as money. Use as power. Build something that outlasts both of you. And if he tries to screw you over, that's what lawyers like me are for." She even talked to Vanessa, who surprised her by being more honest than Keisha expected. "My husband is complicated," Vanessa said, bouncing Isaiah on her lap. "He's generous and manipulative, caring and calculating, genuine and strategic. He can hold all those contradictions at once. But I'll tell you what I know for certain. He loves our son more than anything in this world, and he knows you're the reason Isaiah is breathing. That debt is real, Keisha. Whatever else Devin is doing, he will never forget that you saved his child." And finally, 3 weeks before the birthing center was scheduled to open, Keisha made her decision. She called a meeting with Devin and Jerome, sat them both down in her guest house, and laid out her terms. "I'll run the birthing center. I'll be the face of this project. But I want 50% ownership of the nonprofit. I want final say on all medical decisions. I want my name on the building. And I want it in writing that if you ever try to use this for political gain without my explicit permission, I can walk away with full rights to the model we create and you forfeit all claims to the work. Those are my terms. Take them, or the deal is off. Keisha just drew her line in the sand. But will Devin accept her terms, or will everything fall apart 3 weeks before the grand opening? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the final chapter is going to bring everything to a head in a way you won't see coming. Comment below if you think Devin will agree to Keisha's terms, or if this partnership is about to explode. One more chapter, and you'll see how this incredible story ends. Before we get to the ending of this incredible story, make sure you're subscribed, because you're about to witness something beautiful. Devin looked at Keisha across the table, then at Jerome sitting protectively beside his wife, and for a moment nobody spoke. The tension in the guest house was thick enough to cut with a knife, and Keisha could see Devin's jaw working as he processed her demands. She'd expected him to get angry, to remind her that this was his money and his project, and she should be grateful for whatever scraps he threw her way. But instead, Devin did something that shocked them both. He laughed, not a mocking laugh or a dismissive laugh, but a genuine laugh of relief and respect. "Thank God," he said, shaking his head. "I was starting to worry you were too nice to survive in this world. Those are good terms, Keisha. Fair terms. And yes, I accept every single one of them." He pulled out his phone and called his lawyer right there, instructed him to draw up the paperwork with Keisha's exact specifications, and within an hour they had a contract that gave Keisha real power, real ownership, real protection. Jerome read every word twice. His eyes narrowed with suspicion, looking for traps and loopholes, but even he had to admit the contract was solid. When they all signed, Devin raised his water glass in a toast. To partnership, real partnership. May we save a lot of lives and piss off a lot of people who think things should stay the way they've always been. 3 weeks later, the Jasmine Whitmore Birthing Center opened its doors in the West End, and a line of pregnant women waiting to get in wrapped around the block. The opening day was chaos in the most beautiful way possible. Keisha moved through the bright, warm rooms that Devin's architects had designed according to her specifications, rooms that felt nothing like the cold hospital where she'd saved Isaiah's life. There were birthing tubs and soft lighting, and music, and space for families to be present during labor. There were examination rooms stocked with both modern medical equipment and the traditional tools Keisha's grandmother had used. There were black nurses and black midwives and black doulas, women who looked like the mothers they'd be caring for, women who understood instinctively that when a black woman said she was in pain, she wasn't exaggerating or being dramatic. She was telling the truth and deserved to be heard. Dr. Reynolds had shown up to the opening, presumably to see the whole thing fail, but instead she'd walked to a facility with an expression of grudging respect. By the end of the day, she'd pulled Keisha aside and said something that cost her a lot of pride to admit. "I was wrong about you. What you did that day in the delivery room, what you're building here, it's important work. If you ever need a consulting physician, someone who understands both traditional and modern approaches, I'd be honored to volunteer my time." Keisha had accepted her offer with grace, understanding that people could change, could grow, could admit when they were wrong. By the time the sun set on that first day, 3 babies had been born at the Jasmine Whitmore Birthing Center, all healthy, all with mothers who survived and thrived, and Keisha had cried happy tears the first time in longer than she could remember. 6 months after the center opened, Keisha sat in her office, now located in the beautiful building that bore Devin's sister's name, and reviewed the statistics that proved what she'd always known in her bones. The birthing center had served 247 mothers, 0 maternal deaths, 0 infant deaths, complications caught early and handled with a combination of traditional wisdom and modern medicine, black women treated with respect and dignity and actual care. The numbers spoke for themselves, and news outlets from across the country were calling, wanting to know how they'd achieved what seemed impossible. Devin had been true to his word, staying in the background, letting Keisha be the face and voice of the project, only stepping forward when she needed his resources or connections. He'd become something unexpected, a true partner, someone who used his privilege to open doors, and then stepped aside to let Keisha walk through them first. Jerome had found work at the center too, managing operations and finances, bringing his business degree and his sharp mind to making sure the nonprofit ran efficiently. The tension between him and Devin had eased into something like mutual respect, though Jerome still watched the billionaire carefully, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it never did. Devin kept his promises. He honored the contract. He let Keisha build something that was truly hers. And slowly, carefully, Keisha allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this miracle was real and lasting. But the biggest miracle came on a Tuesday afternoon when Keisha was teaching a prenatal class, and a young woman walked into the center, pregnant and scared and alone. Her name was Destiny. She was 19 years old, and when Keisha looked at her face, she saw herself at that age, saw all the fear and hope and desperate need to believe that things could turn out okay. Destiny's story was all too familiar. No insurance, no family support, turned away from 2 hospitals that said she wasn't sick enough to be seen yet. She'd heard about the Jasmine Whitmore birthing center from a friend, had taken 3 buses to get there, and now she stood in the lobby with tears streaming down her face, convinced that this place would turn her away too. Keisha took Destiny's hand and led her to an examination room, and as she checked the young woman's vitals and listened to the baby's strong heartbeat, she understood with perfect clarity why she'd been put on this earth. Not just to save one billionaire's baby, but to save all the babies, to make sure that girls like Destiny didn't have to die alone and afraid, because nobody valued their lives enough to fight for them. Over the next 3 months, Keisha personally supervised Destiny's care, and when the young woman went into labor on a Friday night, Keisha was there, her hands steady and sure, guiding another baby safely into the world. When Destiny held her daughter for the first time and whispered, "Thank you," through her tears, Keisha knew that every hardship, every struggle, every moment of doubt had been worth it to arrive at this moment. 1 year after the birthing center opened, Devin hosted a celebration at his estate, inviting everyone who'd been part of the journey. Vanessa was pregnant again, due in 2 months, and she'd already made it clear that Keisha would be delivering this baby too, that she wouldn't trust anyone else with something so precious. Isaiah was walking now, a bright, happy toddler who called Keisha Annie and made her heart melt every time. Jerome stood beside Keisha as Devin gave a speech, thanking everyone for their hard work. But when it was Keisha's turn to speak, she found herself looking out at the crowd of doctors and nurses and midwives and mothers whose lives had been touched by this place they'd built together, and the words that came out weren't the ones she planned. "A year ago, I was pulling weeds and convinced my life was over. I'd lost my husband, lost my calling, lost any hope that things could get better. And then I heard a woman screaming, and I did the only thing I knew how to do. I answered the call. I didn't know it would lead here. I didn't know it would give me back my husband, my purpose, my faith in the possibility of change. But I've learned something this year that I want to share with all of you. Miracles aren't always loud or flashy or obvious. Sometimes they're quiet and small, like a baby's first breath. Sometimes they come from the hands of people society overlooks, people the world decided don't matter. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, those miracles grow into something bigger than we ever imagined, something that changes not just one life, but hundreds of lives, thousands of lives. She looked at Devin and Vanessa, at Jerome beside her, at all the faces of the women they'd saved and the babies who'd been born healthy and strong. This is what happens when people who have power use it to lift up people who've been pushed down. This is what happens when we stop accepting that some lives matter less than others. This is what happens when we answer the call, even when we're scared, even when the odds are against us, even when the world tells us we're not qualified or credible or worthy. We change the world, one baby at a time. And that's the end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional, powerful stories that will restore your faith in humanity. Comment below and tell me what part of Keisha's story moved you the most. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that miracles are real and that second chances do exist. Thank you for watching, and remember, you never know when you'll be called to do something that changes everything. When that moment comes, answer the call. God bless you all.